welcome to my channel. If you're new here, hi, hello, welcome. I am Sherrilyn and I am so glad you found me. Today we are covering another Canadian case. Last week was also a Canadian case. I'm actually in the Canadian case vibe right now. I'm really, patriotic lately, I guess. Now this was one that I had no idea about. I'd never heard of it, which is unbelievable because it's wild. And the pure gut instinct that the RCMP officer that we're going to talk about today had to stop a cold-blooded serial killer in his tracks is just wild. I am very anxious to share it with you. We're going to start with the RCMP officer and kind of unfold based on what his process would have been like and him coming to the realization that he did. So on November 27th, 2010, Constable Aaron Keller from the RCMP, which is our Royal Canadian Mounted Police out here in Canada, he was driving on a remote highway in British Columbia, and he was a relatively new cop. He was only in his job for about a year. He's doing patrol. It's 9:30 at night, so it was quite dark outside. And suddenly he sees this black GMC Sierra pickup truck just fly into the highway in front of him. And it's going so fast that it actually kind of slid into the opposite side of the road before it kind of sorted itself out. So because of the area is supposed to be really chill and quiet, and the fact that this person just darts out in front of him, his gut instinct just kicks in and says all right, something's not right. And he calls for backup and just kind of says, I'm not really sure what's going on, but I'm going to suss out the situation and follow this guy. About 9 minutes later, his backup arrives. He is Constable Sadu, and when he gets on the scene, the two of them decide to turn their lights on and follow the truck. The driver pulls away quite quickly with no issues, and both of them walk up to the truck. Constable Sadu was towards the passenger side of the truck, and then Constable Keller walked to the driver's side. As Constable Keller is walking to the driver's door, he's taken back a little bit because the driver already has his license and his registration hanging out the window waiting for him. Being a new constable, this wasn't something that he was experienced with. He was just used to having drivers that were kind of on edge if you asked, or even just being nervous about being asked and having to, shuffle through everything and try to quickly find it. So this also sticks out to him. And then another thing that he finds is odd is that he can see that the driver is wearing shorts and kind of a short sleeve or a long sleeved sweater. Short sleeve sweater? I suppose that could be a thing. It was mainly the shorts that, caused a little bit of concern. That night it was around minus 10 degrees Celsius, which I factored was 14 Fahrenheit for all of my USA people or anybody who goes by Fahrenheit. So not ideal for shorts. And he also had this small red smear on the left side of his chin. He looks down, reads the name on the license plate, and learns that he's pulled over a man named Cody Legebokoff. For somebody who struggles pronouncing just simple words in the English language, you won't be surprised that I'm not going to say the last name often throughout this episode. Cody was a 20-year-old young guy. He was blonde hair, blue eye, kind of had a shaggy hair look to him. He was pretty burly. He was 6'2", weighed about 200 pounds. So he's a big guy. Now, due to all of the red flags that are just blowing like they're in a wind tunnel, Constable Keller asks Cody to get out of the vehicle and just says that he needs to give it a little search. And again, Cody is very cooperative, complies with no issue. As he's hopping out, Constable Keller notices more blood that are on his legs, on his shoes, and on the floor mat of the truck. So they check his pockets, make sure he doesn't have any weapons or anything like that on him. And in one pocket, they find a cell phone. And then on the other one, they find one of those multi-tool on it, like blades and stuff. And Constable Keller immediately notices that there's like red staining that looked like blood on it. So when he asks Cody what it is, he tells Constable Keller that he had used it on some grouse earlier. I didn't know what grouse was. I had to look it up. I didn't know that we had it. And we do in Alberta, so I guess that's pretty embarrassing for me. But it's like a large game bird that it's hunted quite often, and to be honest, like it's tall and it kind of freaks me out. Constable Keller is still just getting bad vibes all around. Tells him that in his personal, humble opinion, it looked like too much blood to be from a bird. And then Cody follows up with, well, yeah, but I had also used it on a deer earlier that I forgot about. So the constable's like, I'm weirded out here, man. Well, he probably didn't say it like that at all. I'm quite confident he actually didn't say it like that at all. It was like, I need you to be honest with me. This situation is looking a little bit concerning. So then Cody goes back and says, all right, I met a friend earlier in Vanderhoof, which was a nearby town, and we came across a deer together. He said that his friend shot the deer. The deer ran off, so they tracked it down and then they killed it with this multi-tool. And he said the reason why he wasn't forthcoming was because they were poaching and he didn't want to get in trouble because he knew it was wrong. So he was just kind of trying to distance himself from getting in more trouble. Again, things are not adding up, but since he had admitted to poaching, Constable Keller knew that he could be detained temporarily on poaching charges. So Cody is put in the police truck while Constables Sadu and Keller search his pickup truck. And inside the truck, they find some drug paraphernalia. They find 2 packs of those like 4-pack mixed drinks. One of them was a White Russian and the other a mudslide. And then they find a pipe wrench that also has what appears to be blood in like the grooves or the teeth of it. And they find this backpack that's like shaped like a monkey. So probably not a backpack that somebody who's, over 6 feet tall, 200 pounds, more like burly would pick up. Sure enough, inside the backpack, they find a polka dot wallet. And according to the health card inside, it belonged to a girl named Lauren Dawn Lesley. So they go back to Cody and they don't lay out all their cards at once. They ask him about the pipe wrench first. And he says that when him and his friend had gone back to chase the deer after they shot it, they also took turns hitting the deer to put it out of its misery. So he's just adding on, like weapons to try to explain all of these things away, which, I mean, okay. But if I were an officer, I'd be like, you had a gun. You had shot at the deer, allegedly. Why not just do that again if you were wanting to put it out of its misery? Regardless, they were like, okay, well, we are going to detain you and place you under arrest for poaching. Cody, once again, was extremely understanding and was just like, yep, I agree with you. I absolutely know that what I did was wrong. So at this point, they had reached out to a conservation officer named Cameron Hill to deal with like the poaching aspect of things, and he arrived on scene shortly before 11 p.m. He gets briefed on the situation. Same thing. He knows something's fishy. Ooh, that's kind of funny because it's like conservation, like with the Wildlife Act, he probably deals with like fishing. Anyways, one of those days. So he's not buying anything. And he specifically was picking up on the fact that if you had a rifle and you were shooting at an animal, why would you then be bludgeoning it to death after to put it out its misery with a pipe wrench? And then putting this deer in the truck, taking it somewhere else, and then dumping it, and then leaving your I don't know, bloody wrench. No one was buying what Cody was putting down is basically what I'm trying to say. So the officers collectively decide that they want to search the area that Constable Keller had initially seen Cody's truck fly out of when he was by himself, which was like on this abandoned logging road. Officer Hill had arrived in this beefy truck, so he had volunteered to go and the other two stay behind. And so he left, and shortly after 11:30 p.m. he came across these fresh tire tracks that were down the road, and suddenly they just stopped. He got out of his truck and he followed footprints that he saw, and as he's following them, he sees blood and drag marks that are leading into this treed area. As he got closer, he finds the body of a young girl laying in the snow. Her face is brutally beaten and her pants are pulled down. That girl was 15-year-old Lauren Lesley, a grade 10 student at Nechako Valley in Vanderhoof. Lauren was the daughter of Doug and Donna Lesley. Her parents had divorced, but were successful co-parents devoted to their daughter. Now, Lauren had been born with a genetic disorder that had left her legally blind with 50% vision in one of her eyes and absolutely no vision in the other. But it was something that she just never let get in the way of what she wanted to do in her life. She is described as somebody who was very caring, compassionate, also sensitive, and full of life. She was also a water baby and enjoyed any and all type of water activities, whether it be swimming, boating, tubing. But something that I found that came up often when people were describing Lauren was just her desire for people to be all treated fairly. And she was somebody who wasn't afraid to speak up when she felt like somebody wasn't. She was really empathetic for the underdog, and I came across a snippet of a journal entry that she had wrote, and I thought that it really showcased that. And in it, she had said that she hears the loneliness of people sitting in the folding chairs at dances. The loneliness is not loud enough for anybody else to hear, but she can hear it. On top of that, she was also very adventurous. Her mother said that she definitely pushed boundaries like many 15-year-olds do, specifically in terms of kind of pushing the limits of where you can go, outside of your small town. So she often wanted to go to Prince George, which was about an hour away from where she lived, and meet with friends that she knew there, but they were friends that her mom didn't know. And this was something that any mother who's experienced kind of those boundary pushes, I don't want to use the word again, but it kind of is what it is, and it encompasses it all because it is a boundary A, and then you're also pushing the boundary of where you live and stay within these confines. So she was wanting to travel further from where her mom was comfortable with. And she would say, there are dangers associated with doing that. They were even seeing a counselor together to talk those issues through. And it was only 2 days prior that she and her mom had gone to a session and talked about her mom just wanting the best for her and that she wasn't laying out these rules to be malicious. Earlier that day, Lauren had spent most of the day with her mom, and then around 8 p.m. she told her mom that she was going to be meeting with a girlfriend of hers for some coffee, and her mom agreed and said, be home by 1 a.m. Unfortunately, what we now know is that Lauren didn't meet with a girlfriend of hers. She met with Cody Legebokoff. And what we now know is that Lauren did not meet with a girlfriend that evening. She met with Cody Legebokoff and was now found by Officer Hill. She was found in the dark of night, freezing cold off a logging road. The thought of that and just putting yourself in that position and your family in that position, your children in that position, like my heart breaks for her. She was just a baby, 15 years old. Now, Lauren and Cody had met a few weeks prior on a social media site that was, I don't know if it was only within Canada. Well, I feel like it's social media, so it can go anywhere, but it had really taken off and was super popular in Canada, and it was called Nexopia. If you were not from Canada and you had a Nexopia, I'm very curious to know. Let me know in the comments if you did. But it was like MySpace, basically. I think it just like took off more in Canada. Lauren went on to meet friends and she found Cody on there. He went by the username One Country Boy and presented himself as just that, a very easygoing country guy. Based on their chats, it was very clear what the motives were for Cody, particularly for reaching out to Lauren. While Lauren was looking for friendship, Cody was basically just looking for, sexually geared conversations or meetups. Nearly all of their conversations started with Cody asking Lauren questions like, what do you like sexually? How about this position or that position? Are you the type of girl that likes getting treated naughtily? But, like much more graphic. Yeah. And Lauren always ignored those questions or just changed the subject, and she'd make it very clear what her age was. She would tell him that she was 15. It seemed like he would obviously push what she was comfortable with, and it was very obvious that whenever he would keep trying with the sexually explicit conversation and she would pull back, that it wasn't working. So then they would still continue having a conversation more on a friendly basis. So I think that's how he continued to build a little bit of trust. It wasn't like if she had ignored the question, he would keep insisting. He would also follow her lead and go with the new change of subject. So a few hours before Lauren's death, she and Cody had started texting around 6 p.m. and Cody asked her what she was doing that evening. They had a little bit of a back and forth conversation, and then Lauren suggested that they meet in Vanderhoof, and she chose her school, which I'm assuming probably did because it was a familiar area for her, like out in public, more of like a safe meeting place. So Cody agrees and he tells her not to tell anybody. And Lauren replies with, well, like we're just hanging out, right? Nothing sexual. Again, 15 years old. Cody didn't answer that question. Instead, he was like, okay, I'm driving a black pickup truck. I'm wearing shorts and I'll stop and I'll get some drinks for us. What do you want? And she replied, some chocolate mudslides. A little while later, another text comes through. It's from Lauren, and she's asking Cody where he's at because she is already at the school now and it was cold outside. So she says that she's cold, and he replies back that he's just getting the drinks and he's on his way. And then she asks him to please hurry. He purchased the drinks at 8:20 p.m. and 10 minutes later, Lauren was seen by a witness. She was sitting on the swings at the school and a black pickup truck pulled up and a stocky dude in shorts got out of the car and walked towards Lauren. This was the last time that Lauren was seen alive. After Officer Hill made the discovery, he radioed to Constable Keller and Sidhu, told them what he just found, and at that moment, Cody Legebokoff was arrested for the murder of Lauren Lesley. When he's confronted with what the two constables on the scene had just learned, he stated that he hadn't been truthful much throughout their interaction, but he was now prepared to be, and he claimed that he found Lauren and that she was already dead. He's taken into custody, and he's not interrogated until the next day. And the next day he's interrogated, and it is an absolute whirlwind. At first he was quite guarded, very brief with his answers. And then after a while, he started opening up and just kind of giving a little bit of a piece of his life. He talked about his job, which was at a Ford dealership, and how he had worked his way up from the shipping department to the parts department. He said he had a very good relationship with his parents. He described himself as a country boy that liked to do hillbilly things as per his own definition. He shared a bit of his upbringing. He said that he was born in Fort St. James. He said he wasn't really like the best student, wasn't a terrible student, but that the majority of his grades were C's. And all around, he was just like an average kid who liked to be outdoors, hunting and fishing, close to his family, close to his siblings, and close to his serious girlfriend, a girl named Amy Vall, who he had also met at work. The two were pretty serious. They had been dating for several months and were in the process of planning on moving in together in the near future. And Amy will come into play in terms of, I guess, pulling out honesty. Well, not honesty. I'm going to backtrack that. I guess more emotion and being able to, I think, allow Cody to, I don't know, relate, have like more of like a humanity aspect to him. I don't know what I'm trying to say. Let's carry on. When Cody was asked to give his version of events of the evening, he said that he had seen some four-wheeler tracks in the area where Lauren was found, so he decided to follow them. Nearby those tracks, he found a cell phone, this monkey backpack, along with a heavy pipe wrench and a knife. So he's saying that he found all of this now. As he's following the area, very similar to the way that Officer Hill had, he said that he noticed that it looked like somebody had been dragged. So he followed those drag marks and came across the body of Lauren Lesley. And when he found her, he said that she was face down. So he had rolled her over, realized that she was dead, and that it was obvious that there was blunt force trauma to her face. And seeing her in that condition scared him shitless. That is his quote. So he got the hell out of there. According to him, this matter-of-factly was him being in the wrong place at the wrong time. At this point, he is informed that there is another case that sounded very similar to the way Lauren was found. It was the case of 35-year-old Cynthia Marr, who had been found 7 weeks prior, an hour away from Vanderhoof, so pretty close. He's confronted with this, and the investigator says this seems similar. You know, they were found quite in similar condition. It wasn't that long ago. I don't think that Lauren is the first person that you killed, and I'm not buying that you found her like that. So at this moment, Cody denies being responsible for either murder and refuses to continue to speak for the day. The next day, though, he agrees to speak to detectives again, and then this time they hone in on that relationship with Amy, hoping to spark some kind of empathy, some kind of emotion, and it did work. Cody said that he had plans to get married with her, have a family together, and it was something that he was looking forward to in life. At this point, that emotion was showing, and when he was asked if he knew Lauren, he admits to the detectives that yes, he did, and that they had met on Nexopia. The night of her death, they had met at the school to drink some alcohol, and then they had sex in his truck. He said afterwards they decided to go for a ride in his truck and just talk, and he told her that he wanted to do some off-roading, and she agreed. So they had turned off down the logging road that she was found on, and he said this is the point where things start to go downhill. Cody said as they're driving along, Lauren starts slapping herself in the face and just screaming that she hates her life. At this point, he's trying to calm her down, and he said that she was going apeshit is the term he used, and she's demanding him to stop the truck. So he did. And he said she got out and continued to go, quote unquote, crazy, hitting herself in the face. And at this point, she grabbed the wrench from the floor mat of his truck and started hitting herself with this wrench. He says there's not much he can do. He's just looking at her, stunned at what's happening, because she is repeatedly hitting herself in the face and the back and the side of the head with this wrench. And then all of a sudden, she starts to stab herself with this knife in the neck until she eventually just collapses to the ground. Cody said the only thing that he thought to do was just get out and drag her towards the bush where she was found. There was no explanation for why he decided to do that, and he just kind of followed it up with, "This is really all I can tell you. I have a family and a girlfriend who loves me. I could never hurt her the way that you are thinking that I did. She did this to herself." Based on this scene, we're going to ignore the fact that the story sounds outlandish. Just based on the scene and the condition that Lauren was found, that story was not adding up. When Lauren was found, her pants and her underwear had already been down, like around her ankles. And since she had a belt on, her pants you'd assume wouldn't have been able to just like slide down just from her body being moved from the snow, from in front of the truck to the side of the bush. Also, if her pants were down when that had happened, or while that was happening, you would assume there would be, like snow built up and collected like in that area, and there wasn't. Which means that the only way that would have happened was that her pants would have been pulled down after she was dragged to the location that she was. When he is confronted with this evidence, he changes his story again. And this time he says that after him and Lauren had sex in the truck, this is when she started screaming and slapping herself in the face. It was like right as she was in the process of pulling up her pants again. Aside from the fact that his story was insulting to believe because it was just so full of bull crap, there were also physical inconsistencies with his story that led investigators to believe that he was responsible for Lauren's death. One of them being the force and the angle of the injuries to her face. So when just those preliminary forensic examinations were done, they found that it would have been impossible for her to have inflicted the injuries she had, not just because of the force that would have been needed, but also the angle of her arm to have hit herself in some of those blows. Your arm physically wouldn't have been able to bend that way. And then, to top it off, like stab herself in the neck. It's like his statements were as ludicrous as the Ellen Greenberg ruling. That, yeah. But Cody stuck to his events, which is what, in my opinion, these people do. It got to the point where he wasn't budging, but there was a reaction from bringing up Amy. So she was brought in to talk to him in hopes that physically seeing her would again sway him a bit. Amy arrives. She walks in, gives Cody a big hug, and just naturally asks what's going on. He is adamant he did not kill anybody. He didn't have it in him. And she's disturbed. She's looking at him and feeling like he's being truthful and saying, I believe you, but what's going on? How can we fix this? And at this point, the detective interrupts and says to Cody, well, I believe that you're not being truthful with the whole situation, but there are things that you have admitted to me that you are not admitting to her. So at least let's give Amy the truth on what you are comfortable with saying. And he agrees and admits to Amy that he had met Lauren on Nexopia, that the two of them had met up, and that they had sex. Again, he follows up with, but I didn't kill her. And at this point, Amy is now shocked because she did not believe that he could have even cheated on her. And now she's like, okay, so I'm now finding out that you have been going behind my back, talking to somebody who is 15 years old, and you have admitted to having sex with her, cheating on me. At this point, the detectives are completely taking advantage of the situation. They're following up with a list of inconsistencies. And again, Amy you can see her start to become suspicious. And then that goes full tilt when they bring up the fact that when his truck was searched, there was drug paraphernalia in there. And at this point, Cody admits that he had used cocaine in the past. And then Amy is described as being visibly disturbed and told Cody she had no idea basically who she was looking at, was no longer able to trust him, and that clearly he was very good at lying and had been lying to her the whole time because she had no idea about this aspect to him. With his back up against the wall and him being pushed more to talk about Lauren, he finally admits that he hit Lauren with a wrench. He follows it up again, which he seems to do with, but I only did it once or twice. And again, there's a shift to his story. He says that he thought Lauren was already dead based off of what she had done to herself, but then he got scared when there was a little bit of movement and saw blood coming from her and wasn't sure if she was suffering. So he picked up the wrench from the ground and hit her in the head just to make sure that she wasn't suffering, kind of like he explained with the deer story. After admitting this, he begs Amy for forgiveness. He says that she's the love of his life. And at this point, Amy says, I can't trust you anymore. She said she wanted to believe his story, that she wouldn't have been able to take it that far, but she just could not stick beside him at that point. So this is when she gives him a very long hug and leaves the room without even looking back and says goodbye. Cody also stops talking. So for the next 10 months, RCMP conducted a behind the scenes thorough investigation that ended up shocking the country when they announced that Cody Legebokoff was being charged with not only Lauren Lesley's murder, but the murder of 3 other women. Those women were 35-year-old Jill Stuchenko, 23-year-old Natasha Montgomery, and the women that they had suspected earlier, 35-year-old Cynthia Marr. Cynthia Marr was the mother of a little girl that had been found 7 weeks prior to Cody being detained by police. Cynthia was an Indigenous woman who, according to her sister, was at a point in her life where she was going through some struggles. She was born with a unspecified disability that is described as being somebody who was vulnerable to people who might take advantage of her. So when she was introduced to drugs by somebody close to her, she quickly became addicted. Her addiction eventually led her to the streets, where she relied on sex work to support her habit. But her family said that she was in the process of working towards a better life. She would remain in contact with her family, stay in touch, and made the effort to attend AA and NA meetings. Cynthia was reported missing on September 23rd when she failed to check in with her friends and family, and this was just over 2 months prior to Cody's arrest. And it was on October 8th when there was a police search in LC Gun Park, which was an hour's drive from Vanderhoof. A member of the search team found Cynthia's remains along this tree-lined area. Similar to Lesley, Cynthia's pants had been pulled down, and she had also suffered stab wounds and blunt force trauma. She also had a number of fractures to her neck, her ribs, her face, even her fingers. The forensics stated that her injuries were consistent with somebody who had viciously stomped on her, which just makes me sick to even think about. During that 10-month investigation period after Cody had been detained, they were able to match samples of Cynthia's DNA to samples found on a sweater and a sock in Cody's truck. It also matched to samples that were taken from a pickaxe and shoes that were in Cody's apartment. A few months prior to Cynthia going missing, a woman named Natasha Montgomery went missing on August 31st. Natasha was also Indigenous and the mother of 2 who was struggling with addiction as well. At the time of her disappearance, she was in the process of becoming a better role model for her children and had started making quite a bit of progress in staying sober. Natasha was so much more than her struggles. She had a long list of talents. She was artistic, somebody who liked to draw a lot. She was also musical and sang. On top of that, she played the trumpet, the clarinet, and she was very skilled at figure skating, something I would love to do. The last time that she spoke to her mother, she had told her mom how excited she was to be celebrating her daughter's upcoming birthday. Natasha never made it to her daughter's birthday, and her mom reported her missing a month after she had last spoke to her. Her body has never been recovered, but forensic testing on blood stains on the shorts that Cody was wearing the night of his arrest did contain Natasha's DNA. Her DNA was also found in his apartment, on his bed sheets, on the wall, his curtains, the floor, and a bath mat in the washroom. Now, Cody's first known victim is Jill Stuchenko, who was reported missing 10 months before the other murders began, which would make Cody only 19 at that time. Jill was the mother of 4 boys, 2 girls who friends and family said she cared about immensely. She was described as a very warm and compassionate person, and also someone who was very talented musically. She was a great singer. Like the other women, Jill had also been experiencing struggles. She was a frequent user of cocaine, and as much as she was trying to work hard and stay sober, her addiction had also brought her into the sex trade. Jill was discovered by a man who was collecting bottles. She was half buried in a gravel pit in Prince George. Jill also suffered a gruesome attack. Her body was covered in bruises. She had a skull fracture, and the amount of blood loss that she had sustained was so extreme that the pathologist had a hard time even retrieving a sample from her. There was also strong evidence of a sexual assault. And at the time that Jill was found, there were samples that were taken and a DNA profile of an unknown male was discovered. So after Cody was arrested and his DNA was run through the system, he ended up being the one who matched that unknown male, linking him to Jill. There was also further evidence that tied them together. Jill's DNA was found on his couch. Her blood was found on the carpet in an apartment that Cody was living at the time of her disappearance. And something that I found really chilling about his living situation is it came to light that when Cody was arrested, he had 3 female friend roommates. They ended up being roommates together, but they were all close prior to that. So he was like the only male living with these 3 females, but their account of him was somebody who had never shown any signs of violence or aggression, which just kind of further hammers home the fact that you just don't freaking know anybody. On July 2nd, 2014, almost 4 years after Cody was arrested, he went to trial. Lauren's father, Doug, ended up testifying early on in the trial, and it just sounded so heartbreaking. He shared how he couldn't identify his daughter because of the extent of her facial injuries. So she was only able to be identified based off a wrist tattoo. But with his testimony, it was clear to see kind of the direction that the defense was going because he was cross-examined and Cody's lawyer asked a lot about Lauren's mental health, trying to just legitimize Cody's claim that she had attacked herself and then, cut herself with a knife. And Doug did acknowledge that Lauren had periodic episodes of depression. She had even been hospitalized a couple of times because of it, but denied that that she was ever suicidal. The prosecution was able to bring forward a forensic pathologist who testified and supported the earlier exam, saying that the injuries to Lauren did not appear to be self-inflicted, or physically possible, to be self-inflicted. And then in addition to that, there was also bruising on her arms that were in the position of suggesting that she had tried to defend herself. When it was time for the defense to present their case, they kind of surprised everybody by calling Cody to the stand. And he just talks about how much of a regular guy he is, just somebody working at a dealership who was the male roommate with 3 other girls. He explains that this house was kind of the house that became the party house, and sometimes there would be upwards of 100 people that would attend these parties at their house. And from these parties, he says he met somebody that he referred to as X. So this is the first time that he comes forward saying that there were 3 other people involved in the murders, but he was only going to refer to them as X, Y, and Z. And he said because if he was found guilty, he was not going to go to jail as a rat and suffer the consequences of what being labeled a rat will do to you. So according to Cody, X, Y, and Z were drug dealers involved in the murders of Jill, Cynthia, and Natasha. He said during one of these parties, one of them showed up with Jill. Cody said he was attracted to Jill. They had a sexual encounter. Just to give you an idea of how this guy spoke on the stand, when he was describing this interaction, he said, well, she wasn't an ugly person, so I figured I'd try my luck. Like, who talks like that at their own murder trial on the stand? Cody Legebokoff does. So after they had sex, he said that one of the drug dealers then tells him that Jill has to die because she owed a lot of money. And then without even being able to have a say, she was beaten to death in his apartment. And he said that part of that attack had happened on the couch where some of her DNA was found. He was adamant, though, that he did not kill her, but admitted to helping put her body in the back of a pickup truck, and then he cleaned the scene, tried to clean up the blood where her body had been. Now, despite these 3 members of this drug alphabet game murdering a woman in his home, he says that he continues to socialize and do drugs with them. He alleges that there are really no concerns after what happened with Jill until one day comes and he's hosting another party, and one of the drug dealers then brings Cynthia Ma to his house. Cody is told that she also had to die, and then he says that he just heard a snap and a thud and then saw Cynthia laying on the ground. He said this time he drove the drug dealers with Cynthia's body to LC Gun Park. It was in his pickup truck. And he said when they got there, they realized that she wasn't dead. So he gave the drug dealers a pickaxe that he had in his truck. And then they, finished the job. Air quotes here for anybody who's listening to this podcast style. And that's how her DNA was on the pickaxe that he owned. A little while later, Cody said at another party, Natasha Montgomery showed up at his apartment again with X, Y, and Z. And then he was told she also was going to die. He said that she was bludgeoned in his apartment. And with Natasha, he says that he was asked for a saw. He said he couldn't watch, but he believed that she was dismembered and her body was taken somewhere. This time he stayed behind and cleaned the apartment. Basically, if the intention was to put Cody on the stand to show any empathetic side of him or to humanize him in any way, it didn't work. He was seen as somebody who was very cold and emotionless. For example, when his lawyer had asked him how he was feeling at the time that all 3 of these women were being murdered in his home by these monsters, he said, well, he knew that it was wrong, but there wasn't really anything that he could do to stop it. When the Crown cross-examined Cody, it was made very clear that his story sounded ludicrous, that somebody would allow 3 random drug dealers to come and party at their house and murder somebody and then just come back another 2 times and continue to do that again. They also brought up the fact that he just so happened to be the only one with Lauren when she allegedly attacked herself. Like, he's this magnet for people who just want to murder people around him or unalive themselves. After 3.5 months of trial, just before jury deliberations, the defense informed the judge that Cody was wanting to plead guilty on 4 counts of second-degree murder. His plea was denied, and the jury only had to deliberate for less than a day. Ultimately, he was found guilty of first-degree murder on all 4 counts. For each murder charge, Cody was sentenced to life without parole. He is not eligible for parole for 25 years. And because Canada is Canada, each sentence is running concurrently, meaning he is serving them all at the same time and then not one after another, which is what he deserves, because then he would just be behind bars for 100 years. It breaks my heart that Natasha Montgomery's body has never been recovered, and so infuriating when monsters like this hold on to that piece of information from the family. It makes me so sick. And I've said this before. It's like the very, very smidgen least that you can do on top of the trauma that you've already caused in the first place is just allow somebody to bring their loved one home. And it's so disturbing that with Natasha, he had mentioned that X, Y, and Z, again, for listeners, that is very exaggerated air quoting, had asked for a saw and that he believed she was dismembered, which we can assume means that he doesn't believe it. He knows she is dismembered. And when that happens, the possibilities of where somebody is endless because they could be scattered somewhere. And that is so sickening to think about. I found it really interesting that nobody from Cody's family attended his trial, and the only person from his family who has spoken publicly about the situation is his grandfather. And even he says he can't even start to try to make sense of what happened. He just knew that Cody had a good upbringing. His parents loved him. He seemed to get along with people. He never showed the family any side of violence. His thought, which I'm sure is just something that you would have to walk yourself through being related to somebody like this, was that there's some sort of like split personality or something going on in his head. And I'm sure that's more for him to feel better about the situation, because that would be very hard to digest. In 2015, Cody filed an appeal for his sentence. He said that because he was denied the request to change the venue from Prince George to Vancouver, it put him at a disadvantage because there was so much media coverage on the case. About a year later, 3 judges in BC came back and supported the original judge's decision to not move it to Vancouver, and basically just said the case was covered not only all over BC, but into Canada. So moving it to somewhere else within even just that province wouldn't have made a difference. So often when I was researching this case and looking into it, I kept thinking about that RCMP officer, which is why I wanted to start with it, because it makes you think, like, had he not followed his gut, I personally believe wholeheartedly there would be many, many murders committed by Cody. And it also brings into question the possibility that there could be other victims out there that just have not been identified yet or have not been tied to him yet. Because the truth of the matter is 3 out of those 4 known victims were vulnerable. They were in high-risk situations, and he preyed on that vulnerability, just assuming that, like a lot of these monsters who think like him, that these women are not human and that they don't have a family and a life and people who love them and miss them. But they are. They do have families. They have a lot of people who love them. And it makes people like Cody, like Robert Pickton, just even bigger pieces of human garbage to prey on people like that. It's like messing with like elderly or like children, like people who are like in a more vulnerable situation. Like just F off. Why? Lauren Lesley's family, they just sound remarkable. They had done an interview and said that they were able to find small comfort in the fact that their daughter's death had ended what they believed was going to be a serial killing rampage. He has been tied to being somebody who uses the Highway of Tears to prey on his victims. And if you don't know, the Highway of Tears is a 447-mile section of Highway 16 between Prince George and Prince Rupert in British Columbia, and it's been the location of crimes against many missing, murdered Indigenous women beginning in 1970. Diving into all of those disappearances, murders, abductions, it's bone chilling. Cody is somebody I hope never ever sees life outside of prison. He is eligible for parole in 2029, which is way too freaking soon, and that will have been after serving 15 years of his sentence, which means he could possibly be a free man by the time he is 39 years old, like not even 40. I'm personally betting that he would never be a free man like the monsters before him, like Robert Pickton and Paul Bernardo. I think Paul Bernardo was actually recently eligible for parole and he didn't even try, because if you're somebody like that, you just constantly get denied, which I'm desperately hoping Cody would fall under that category. My concern is, I'm not saying that, like, speaking for everybody within, whoa, Sherrilyn, let's not hit your microphone. In Canada by any means, I know that this case had garnered a lot of attention nationwide, but I didn't know about it. And somebody who, follows quite a bit of true crime, I was surprised that I didn't. So if I had seen that he was coming up for parole, I would have definitely looked into it and then been shocked. But now I can even be more on top of looking into it and doing my part in terms of being like, no. And I love the fact that my audience is actually primarily in the United States and UK. So now we get to hit on some other areas of the world and get your guys' support too, if that were ever to come. So I am praying for all of the victims in this case, and most importantly, Natasha Montgomery's family. It just breaks my heart that they have not been able to bring her home, and I hope one day he would be able to bring that peace to her family. Okay, that is it for me today. If you haven't already, please don't forget to like and subscribe. It means the world to me. I love and I appreciate you so much. I will see you in the next video. I will miss you terribly until then. And also, if you don't know, your girl's going to CrimeCon in Nashville on May 31st to June 2nd. So if you've been wanting to get some hugs and snuggles in, please come and see me there. I cannot freaking wait to meet you all. So many of my supporters are in the US, so I hope Nashville would be feasible for you to come and hang out. If you are going to come, please use my code Sherrilyn for 10% off. Not only does it obviously give you a % off and give you some savings, which is nice, but it also lets them know that people want to see me, and then I can maybe go back to the next one, and who knows, maybe the next one will be closer to where you live. So yeah, if you could do that and support me in that way, that would be so appreciated. Okay, I will let you go now. I will see you in the next video. I'll miss you terribly. Until then, make sure you love each other, love yourself, and I will see you soon. Bye.